So we haven't talked about how Farsight developed over the years. I don't know when you want to do, where you want to fit that in, because it's very important. Because I think you brought psychology into Farsight through your
I think
business.
I did, yes, not intentionally. I mean, I didn't purposely think it through, but yes, because I was young and had no idea what I was doing when I decided opening a business was a good idea. And I didn't know what running a business entailed. And I would think most business owners do this. We're particularly good at one thing. I was good at accounting, but I've seen it in other clients. You're good at architecture, you're good at engineering, or you're good at software design. And you open a business because you want to do this thing for yourself instead of for somebody else. But running a business is an entire job on its own. And we're not prepared for it because we didn't go to business school. We didn't learn anything about business. We learned our profession. And you open this business.
Different skill set.
It's a whole skill set. It's an entire, and in fact, it's multiple skill sets, because a business has got hundreds of roles. There's admin and logistics and operations and finance and marketing and production and customer care and all these things that in a fully fledged business are run by multiple people. But when you launch your own, you're everything.
And marketing on itself, it's like, whoa, that's like scary.
It's terrifying, and particularly for someone who's good at numbers and doesn't feel particularly good with people. It's very scary to do marketing and sales. But I undervalued what I was offering as well, and I was too cheap, and I kept trying to build by just taking on more clients, because I figured that was the way you increase your turnover, and then you've got more money, and then you can hire someone, or you can add something else, or whatever the case might be. And so I just kept trying to add to the income, and all I did was overwork myself. So I burnt out quite badly, and I didn't even recognize it the first time around, because burnout, it's not always that easy to know what it is. It feels like stress. It just feels like overwork, and you don't really question why you're feeling that way. I just assumed, well, this is part of running a business. You get really busy, you have to deal with it.
Tired and stressed.
You just push through, that's how I thought you handle those things. So I managed to burn out more than once, because I didn't recognize it the first time. And this third time was very, very bad, and very bad, verging on collapse, and I had to step back. And although everyone's always very sympathetic when they hear how bad it was, but actually it was the best thing, because it made me stop. It made me step back and go, I can't keep pushing through. If I keep pushing through, I'm going to die. At that stage, my emotions were out of whack. My body chemistry was out of whack. I was badly overweight. I was very unfit. I wasn't sleeping properly, and everything was broken. And if I'd carried on pushing, it would have been very detrimental. So I had to stop, and so I had to.
Sort of forces you to change, yeah.
And I had to change the way things happened, and because I changed the way things are, and I started relying more on other people, and I put better systems in place and better processes in place, and looked after myself more. And then I suddenly realized I had time to breathe. I could actually have mornings off, or weekends off, or all these things that I hadn't had before. And then I had time to actually think about my business itself, instead of just the work. So I could start improving the business and the product. And then I realized that I had time for the one thing that I had always wanted time for, which was for the clients themselves.
To help people,
been so entrenched in the work, in getting the books done, in getting the SARS returns in, that I never had time to spend with my clients and ask them what else they needed, and were they okay. And and when I had time to look up and actually focus on them, I realized they were going through the exact same thing. They also were interested in their work and in looking after their clients because they'd done the same thing I had. They'd opened a business because they were good at something. They didn't know how to structure it.
So what did you change if someone was listening to this? What did you actually change in your outlook on your business to be able to free yourself up to breathe and to look in a different way?
Well, the most important thing, there were three big shifts in thinking that I didn't realize I had at the time. Obviously, I was a lot of retrospective thinking that helped me see these. But the first shift was the recognition that the way you work is more important than how much you work. Because I've never been scared of hard work. I just worked. If I had to work all the way through the night, I worked through. The year I opened my business, SARS had that amnesty for small businesses. They offered there was an 8-month amnesty where if you hadn't submitted any returns at all, nothing, they gave you 8 months to come to them and get it up to date and sorted and clean, and they wouldn't charge penalties or interest. They would only charge the tax due for however many years. It didn't matter. You could be 20 years trading and they wouldn't charge penalties and interest. That was in the first year that I opened, and I had 4 clients that I had to do that for. And I remember literally working through the night in the last week before the deadline, because I had to get those books up to date and then the returns up to date, and then you had to do a submission to SARS, with specific codes and all sorts to say that this client is asking for that amnesty. I was young enough to do it, and I was
eager enough, yeah.
So work through the night, but and that was fine in that circumstance. It was necessary, but I've just always been like that. I need something, I get up at 4 o'clock and just work. Go to bed at stop working at 8, get up at 4 o'clock again and work. Because that's
what I thought. South African thing. People, we are hard workers. We're known, like in England, all over the world, as people who work hard.
It's work, yeah. We don't really think twice, which is a great quality, except that you really need to be working on the right things.
Right. Yeah.
And I wasn't, at the time. So that was the first mindset, was to realize that I had to work the right way. I had to be working on the right things, not just working hard. So that, I had to spend some time working out what those things were. And the second shift was that I shouldn't be doing everything myself. Because one of the mistakes I made when I started out was as soon as I got to a point where I had more work than I felt I could handle, I thought, well, I'll bring in a bookkeeper. And I specifically looked for one as well that was older than me, because I thought a bit more experience would be beneficial. And I assumed, which, they always say assumption is the mother of mistakes. I assumed that because accounting has specific protocols, you have to do it a specific way. And a bookkeeper with more experience would therefore do it better, is what I assumed. Yeah. And so I thought I could just give her the paperwork and get a result that I was happy with. And what I've learned over the years is even though we have set protocols, even though there might be a specific way to do something, we are all unique. We are all our own people and trained by different people, and we approach things completely differently. And it doesn't even mean that we do things wrong, but it's not necessarily the way I would have done it. And if you want someone, or you're going to start building a team, if you want people to do things the way you want them, you want a specific level of quality, you want a specific outcome, if you want your clients to be contacted in a specific way, you need to communicate that. You actually need to tell the other person exactly how you want it done. But I hadn't learned that yet, so I gave away this work and I got back what I felt wasn't good enough for a lot of money. Well, for me, it was a lot of money. And I was so disappointed that I was like, I'll just do it myself. I'll just, I'm not going to. And then I think about a year or two later, I tried getting students then and thinking, I could train them, but you put a huge amount of time into training. And again, I didn't have the exact protocols laid out. I didn't have these steps and procedures. I just, again, assumed they would know the bookkeeping, and I just trained them in how to use the software and deadlines and things like that. And again, they would disappoint because these poor students weren't being trained in what I needed. They were just this blanket training that I thought would give them enough for them to be perfect, when I hadn't explained what I considered perfect.
So you tried both ways, senior and junior.
And I was disappointed both times, and I just gave up, and I thought, well, I'll just do everything myself. But that's the worst possible thing you can do, because you can't build a business which, like I said earlier, has hundreds of roles in it by being one person. So again, I had to go through shifts in my thinking and this recognition that I need to rely on other people. So I either have to let go of my standards of perfection, my perfectionism, which in our profession is quite a thing.
Very difficult.
Very perfectionist in nature. And it's a good thing. It's necessary in our profession. So I either had to let go of these standards of profession, of perfection, or I had to become better at explaining what I considered to be perfection. And luckily, I went with the second one, because, as I say, we need perfection in our industry. And I was also lucky with at the time, I got a family member who needed a job and wanted to do accounting. So I could sort of trust her, and I gave her some work and trained her properly, and it worked. It was such a relief. So yeah, and I learned to start delegating and to start relying on other people, but to also know how to give work away. So that,
training is very important, I found. So if you don't train them up, then they don't know and how everything fits together.
And it's not fair. It's not fair on them. You can't expect someone to just work it out.
Well, you think they'll ask if they don't know, but then they don't know. So it's that thing that you have to manage.
And if they're really young, like the students, they're scared to ask because it's their first job. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to rock the boat. They're on 3 months probation, and they really want the job. And so it's just not fair to leave it in their court, expect them to ask the right questions and do these things. But we learn over time. So and then the third thing was my recognition that I needed to grow, that I didn't know what I needed to know, and I didn't know what to learn because I didn't know what the gaps were. I didn't even know what questions to ask. I didn't know I didn't know what I didn't know. So I joined a mentoring group specifically for accounting owners, and went to go learn what these other accounting owners, people who were much bigger companies, much bigger turnovers. I was very much the small fish in that pond, kept my mouth shut most of the time because I didn't even want them to know how tiny I was. And I just learned, I just absorbed information, and that was one of the best things I ever did for me, was to recognize that you can learn from people who've done it before you. And they're willing. They're willing to share it. A lot of business owners are really willing to help fellow business owners because they've been through all of that, and they they know what it's like. So and I would say, the first thing I would say to a business owner who is feeling overwhelmed or is in that position where they're working too hard and doesn't want to hand over the work because no one does it properly, is systems and processes. That's where you start, is making sure you have defined for yourself how things are done step by step in your business. What are the outcomes you want? And then you will be able to explain them to someone else.
And find the right person as well.
Mhm.
to understand what you're saying. Yeah.